If that clip was a little confusing, then you've obviously never seen the movie. By the way, you now know I didn't forget how to use a video clip to start a sermon. In the 1993 movie Groundhog Day, Bill Murray plays weatherman Phil Connors. Phil is everything that is wrong with humanity. He's self-centered, egotistical, arrogant, rude. You can pick your word, but in short, he is a jerk. That is, until he is sent to Patuxent County, Pennsylvania, to cover another Phil, the official groundhog. Hence the name of the movie, Groundhog Day. While there, Phil gets trapped in reliving the same day over and over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, there's been some theories that Phil might have spent, as far as the movies and you watch how it goes, he might have spent as much as 6 months living the exact same day over and over and over. At first he's confused, then he becomes angry, then his anger leads him to try to take his own life, trying to end this very day. Then he decides he's going to take advantage of people, that he must be some kind of a god. But then something happens. As Phil is wandering around his day once again, he pays attention to a homeless man. Ironically, if you watch the movie, the homeless man has been in just about in every scene that could possibly exist for Phil. It's just at this moment, he decides to pay attention to him. He sees him and he sees him in trouble. He takes him to the hospital and he dies. And so he decides, I have the day to do over. And so Phil makes it his mission for the next few renditions of the day to try to save this homeless man's life. But he can't do it. So then in that moment when he realizes he can't save his life, he decides everybody else on that day gets a do-over. He is going to work very hard to create the perfect day for everybody else in the city. He saves a young man that falls out of a tree, keeps him from breaking his arm. Just as the flat tire goes down on some elderly ladies that are driving through town, there is Phil. He just happens to have the right size tire there, ready to change their tire for them. A man begins to choke in a restaurant, and Phil happens just in time to go through and give the Heimlich maneuver to save his life. A young couple that is thinking about calling their relationship quits, Phil is there just at the right moment to give that piece of advice that saves their relationship. He's determined he's going to make this day perfect. Now hold that thought, because here we are. We have been discussing what it means to be Parkview Christian Church. We went through this name change, and I hope you're starting to catch on. It wasn't just a name change. I'm hoping you're beginning to understand I want a philosophical change in the way that we do church. We've been looking at this thing, and we're beginning to look at it, and we got to this background where the sun is rising, and we have the idea of we want to shine, and we've been trying to figure out what it means to shine. And so we've been spelling it out for you. Started out with S stands for serve God with all my heart. The H stands for honor God with all of my worship. The I we learned last week, I stands for invite others to come. By the way, I'd like to call your attention, if you look on the tables, the front and back, you'll see the official, I gave you the test samples last week, the official little invite cards. I'm encouraging you, grab stacks of these, put them in your pockets, put them in your car, put them in your purse. When you're going places, you now have a tool that you can use to do exactly what our I stands for. Invite others to come. These are non-intrusive. They're able to say on the back, they just simply say, come, everything is ready, and gives the time of the worship. Because if we're going to shine, that's part of the idea. You invite others to come. And so now we get to the N, and N, well, I had somebody try to guess for me. They said it was going to stand for nurture. It does not stand for nurture. N stands for notice the needs of others and meet them. Now, when we look at the N, this kind of is a two-part thing, because just noticing the needs is not enough. It is notice the needs of others and meet them. Now, we have a churchy word for this. We call this word ministry. And you're probably trying to figure out, why didn't you just use the word ministry? Well, first of all, that would have made it shine instead of shine. And that didn't really work well with what I wanted to do. But plus the fact that we tend, when we hear the word ministry, we get our S and we get our N mixed up. We kind of get the two confused. As a matter of fact, we try to make them the same, and it really isn't the truth, because all ministry is serving, but not all serving is ministry. All ministry, make sure you hear that, all ministry is indeed serving, but not all serving is necessarily ministry. You see, serving is what you do for God. It's usually internal to the church. There's a lot of things that go on in the background that are just plain serving. They are the things that we offer back to God. It's not that it's a to-do list, but it's usually not attached directly to a person. You see, serving is important to the church. The church could not function without people serving. But ministry is directly targeted at a person or groups of people. So when we're trying to define the difference between serving and ministry, serving is something that I offer back to God. It's something that I'm doing strictly to help God's ministry here. But ministry usually has a target. You go out and you look at somebody and you say, I am targeting this ministry to reach them. We have a puppet ministry in this church. It is not to minister to puppets. That's a good thing. The whole idea was to minister to children through a medium that they would understand. We have a ladies' ministry in the church. The idea of a ladies' ministry isn't necessarily that ladies are doing ministry, because ladies do ministry in all kinds of places. A ladies' ministry should have a target of doing ministry to ladies. If you have a seniors ministry in the church, it is targeted to do ministry to seniors. So the idea of a ministry is it must have a target. A church cannot survive without serving, but just so you know, it cannot grow without ministry. Serving will keep the church in maintenance mode. If you're serving in the church, we can keep the doors open and the lights on, and we can continue to have sermons, and we continue to sing songs, we can continue to do the things that we do, but unless we have ministry, the church never grows. The church stays the same as it's always been. So ministry is the way that we move out of maintenance mode into outreach mode, because we're going to notice the needs of others, and we're going to meet them. And so for this, we have to go back to Phil Connors in Patuxent County, Pennsylvania, and we're going to kind of have a groundhog experience today. Because we're going to look at three passages of Scripture, and as we're looking at these three passages of Scriptures, you're going to think, my goodness, preacher must be running out of material because we've looked at these before. That's okay. Guess what? We'll probably come look at them again. Because this idea of ministry is so important. So here we go. We're going to begin in Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 through 45, probably a linchpin of Jesus' view on ministry. And I want you to look at how Jesus approaches these people. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." Then they will answer, listen to this, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" Then he gives his answer. Pay close attention. He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Now, as you begin to look at these scriptures, and it kind of dawns on us that the goats, that's what they were in this particular parable. The goats were shocked to be called goats. They did not understand the idea that they were goats. They were not part of the sheep body because something was missing from their life. So the question is what didn't they notice? What is it that went by them that made them not to the part where Jesus says, "Come on in, those who are my good and faithful servants"? What is it that separated them? And what they did not notice, they did not notice the hungry. They did not notice the thirsty. They did not notice the stranger. They did not notice the naked. They did not notice the sick, and they did not notice the outcast. This kind of goes back to our inviting others to church. Notice all of these people have something in common. Their needs are physical. These people are missing physical basic needs of life, and the goats never noticed it. Now, they saw them. They saw these people. They saw what was going on in their life, but they never were able to make the connection between this is what God has called us to do in the church, to be a ministry to the lost, to be a ministry to the hungry, to be a ministry to the thirsty, to be a ministry to those that are in need, to be a ministry to those that nobody else accepts. God has called us to be a ministry. And if we're unwilling to do that, well, I didn't write the story. That's the good news. You can read what goes on in the story right there. He says, don't consider yourself part of the body unless you actually can see these things and you're willing to do something about them. See, he wasn't so concerned that they never saw it. He said the problem is you never did anything about what you saw. You were just content to see it and go on by. And usually we make the mistake, we try to make the saying that, well, I'm going to pray about it. Well, you won't hear me say this very often in church. They just never paid attention to the needs. They started to understanding what they were seeing is all about. And then guess what? God does not want you to pray about it. Now, I won't say that very often in church. When it comes to ministry, there is no prayer needed. Just listen to what James chapter 2, verse 16 says. Suppose a brother or a sister without clothes and daily feeding. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm, well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? What good is it if all I ever do is I'm saying I'm going to pray about a need? If I see somebody that's hungry, what good is it if I just pray for them to have food? If I see somebody that is cold, what good is it for me to say, keep warm? If I see somebody that is outcast, if I see somebody that's down, what good is it for me just to go and pray about it? You see, Jesus has a different perspective here. If you know about the need and you are able to meet the need, God doesn't expect you to pray about it. No prayer is needed because God expects you to do it, not pray about it. God has put that ministry need right there in front of you. He is hoping to get your attention. He's hoping that you can see the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the outcast, the people that are sick. He's hoping that you can see them so that, guess what? You can meet their need. I honestly believe God never puts a need in front of a Christian that He does not expect us to meet it if we are capable. And that's a hard statement. Because you know what? I live my life out there in the world, and there are needs every single day. Every single day I see somebody in need. Every single day there's an opportunity for me to do ministry, and I have to be honest with you, sometimes I don't do it. There's a great many times that I pass the need by. And so when I began to look at this, God doesn't just expect me to notice. God expects some action out of me. And if He expects some action out of me, then He expects some action out of you. And He expects some action out of us as the church because this is the way that we shine. It's funny, we get about, I'm guessing, I'm going to take a wild guess here, but I've done some tallies before. We get about 25 to 30 calls a month on the church phone. It's probably one of the only phone calls we get at the church for people that are in need. Now, some of it is legitimate, some of it is not. We have a system that we try to use to figure out and find out who's just kind of playing the system. They're not really in need and those who are. But you do understand we owe it to every single person that comes here to at least try to service their needs in some way. We owe it to every single person that calls this church. We owe it to each and every one of them to say, how can we help you? Now, when we do our due diligence and we find out they're uninterested in being helped except for just one-time thing, then we have some decisions to make there. But we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our God. We owe it to our own ministry to say, you know what, can I help you? Because maybe through that helping, we will be able to extend ourselves out, and the next time they might have a different kind of need. It might be a spiritual need. It might be an emotional need. It might be a mental need. And now they're going to remember those that helped them physically, and they'll be able to come back and say, well, maybe we can come back there and there'll be something else for us there. You see the way this works? God just kind of expects us. He expects us to see it. And he expects us to take our action. Now, we're going to turn to a scripture. If you have your copy of God's Word, I want to ask you to make your way here because we're going to spend a little time here. Luke chapter 10, verses 30 through 35. If you're not already there, does anybody know the heading that goes with this story? It's called the Good Samaritan. This is a great story if you want to understand what it means to notice the needs of others and meet them. And I want you to begin to look at the story of the Good Samaritan. How about I just read it to you first? By the way, you notice we never have left the parables, have we? We've come back and we've hit on just about every single parable Jesus told this year. So let's make sure we don't forget this one. In reply, Jesus said to a man who was going down to Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to a place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said. When I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Now I want to break this story down. Not that we haven't done this before, but I want to take a little different spin on what you're seeing here. Let's start with the robbers. They're there. They're part of the story. And they have a purpose. They came to steal. They wanted what the man had. They came to kill. They left him on the side of the road so that he would not make it anywhere else. In short, they came to destroy. They came to take that man's possessions, and they came to take that man's life, and they did not care who he was, and they just left him there. And we see those 3 words, and I'm hoping it's all making sense. Steal, kill, and destroy. Whose job is that? Well, that's Satan. That's what he wants to do to each and every individual that's out there on the highway of life. He wants to steal that thing that God has given you. He wants to steal your relationship with Christ. He wants to make sure that you do not establish that relationship, and ultimately he wants to see you destroyed. That's the robber. Now, along the road, we also have a victim. And the victim, well, he was just living his life. He didn't ask for any of this. He didn't ask to be robbed. He probably was happening along the road very merrily, and we suppose that he was Jewish. Now that's important in Jesus' story because that means he would be a child of God, one of the chosen ones, Abraham's descendant. So you need to understand that sometimes ministry has to go to those that are in the church as well as those outside of the church. Somehow we get the idea that once they're in the church that everything is supposed to be okay. There are a lot of people in the church that are in need. There are a lot of people in the church that need us to notice their needs and attempt to meet them. As a matter of fact, that's a good way to get started, is to notice the needs inside of our own body, begin to meet those, and begin to get that itch. Because once you meet it a few times, then you begin to see it on the outside. You're like, well, we can do that too. So he was Jewish, and he was somewhat of a foolish person. Nobody traveled the road between Jericho and Jerusalem alone. That's a dangerous section of town. Usually when you went from Jericho to Jerusalem, in biblical times, you would try to find a caravan that was going that way. You would find some travel buddies that were going that way. You never traveled this road alone because guess what? There were robbers on the road. There were thieves. There were people that wanted to take your life. There were people that wanted to take your things. It was dangerous. And so this man made a foolish decision that he was going to go it alone. Well, you think about people. Haven't many of us decided at some point in our life we're going to go it alone? We're going to make our own decisions, do things our own way, and so we start down life's road just like this man. I will be okay. I will figure it out. Maybe we could even say that he got what he deserved what he got. I mean, if you're going to do something foolish, if you're going to do something dumb, if you're not going to listen to what's going on, then maybe you deserve to be beaten and left on the side of the road. That's not the attitude that we want to have. The idea that you just get what you deserve is not the attitude that Jesus had. That is not what he wanted us to see out of this story. This man was a victim. He was a victim of what we call life. A life that is separated from God. And on that road, he indeed was attacked. He was stripped, beaten, and left for dead. Nobody cared for this man. Of course, Jesus sends a couple of heroes his way. We would call them servants. And Jesus was really particular when he picked who was going to be on that road with this man, because he picked a priest and a Levite. And he picked that because the audience would have understood it. Both would have been good servants. As a matter of fact, there's a good chance that the priest was on his way back down to Jerusalem to serve at church that night. There's a good chance that the Levite had something to do that evening that had to do with God. They would have been very good servants, busy doing God's work. Busy doing things in the church. Maybe even busy doing them for all the right reasons. They are legitimately serving God with all their heart. But just so you know, serving God with all your heart isn't what God expects. That's part of what God expects. You have to have all the letters if you want to really understand what it means to shine. And so these men both were given the chance to minister. Both noticed the man. As a matter of fact, it says they saw the man. They saw him lying there. Kind of like you see these deer on the side of the road these days. You know, the deer realize it's hunting season, so I'm going to head to the road. And that isn't very smart either, because they run out in front of the car and you see them all over the place, deer laying on the side of the road. The guy, well, that is kind of what this man was. He's laying on the side of the road and he's beaten, and he's bleeding, and he's battered. And the priest and the Levite happened by, very good servants, but they noticed the man, and what happened? Well, I'm going to the other side of the road. I'm going to turn my head. I didn't really see it. I don't want to get involved. I got time. I got my good clothes on. I don't have time to get all dirty. I don't have any time for this. And so they didn't actually do anything about what they saw. You see, both were not interested in ministry. Here's the funny thing. Jesus leaves it open-ended. We're not told why. Maybe they were afraid of the road. Maybe they were afraid that maybe it was a trap. And if they stopped and rescued the man, that somebody's going to come out and beat them as well. Maybe they had legitimate reasons in the back of their mind as to why they could not stop to minister to this man. But Jesus didn't see anything that reason as valid. Here was a life in trouble. Here was an opportunity for you to do something for God outside of the church, and you simply crossed over to the other side of the road and you just went. Jesus is making a point to his Jewish audience at this point. It isn't enough just to serve God. Being a priest or a Levite or whatever title you want to have in the church is not what God is interested in. God is interested in the people that want to shine. People that are willing to see the needs of people and meet them. God is interested in a church that's willing to do ministry. And here we go. It's the Samaritan. A guy that wouldn't be labeled a Christian. A guy that wouldn't have been labeled one of God's. As a matter of fact, a guy that would have been looked down upon by the Christians. How many times do we see it in our modern day world? There are other organizations out there, other organizations that have nothing to do with God, and they're the ones out there doing ministry. They're the ones out there pushing to meet people's needs. While we, the church, are just kind of sitting here comfortable. We're willing to look at the needs and say, well, you know what? There's probably a federal program for that. We're willing to look at needs and say, well, they can get help somewhere. We're almost like Scrooge from the Christmas Carol movie. Aren't there poorhouses? Aren't there other things? Aren't there prisons? Aren't there places to take? You realize God made a place to take care of those needs. He called it the church. And so this Samaritan comes through, and he saw the man, and he came to him. That's the first step if you want to do ministry. You've got to go to where they are. You can't expect them to come to you because their lives are battered, beaten, and broken, and they're on the side of life looking for things. You have to be willing to go to them. You have to be willing to look at their life as they are right here, right now, today. He had pity on him. That word, sympathy. He put himself in that man's place as this man was laying on the side of the road, and he looked at him and he's thinking, what if that were me? What if I was the one that was robbed and beaten and broken and sitting on the side of the road? Wouldn't I want somebody to stop? He was able to sympathize with the man's situation. And when you begin to sympathize with people that are broken, it makes you want to take action. See, I think this is where the church is disconnected sometimes. We see the need. Maybe even we go so far as to say, I'll stroke a check to try to meet the need. But we never want to get close enough to the people. We never want to get right there in their face. We never want to get in their space, in their bubble, as we call it with Benjamin. We never want to get in their bubble, because the second we get in their bubble, then we might actually feel something, and then God may start to work on us. We want to keep our barrier up nice and safe. Now, when he begins to do ministry, I want you to see the path that he took. First thing he did is he attended to his immediate need. What was the immediate problem? The immediate problem was he was beaten and bleeding on the side of the road. If he did not get medical attention, this man was going to die. It was a physical need he attended to. He said, I'm going to put the bandages on. I'm going to do what I can to stop the bleeding now. That's important for us to remember. Sometimes we have to do some immediate need intervention. Somebody comes in and their life is just as broken as it can be, and although they have no interest in spiritual stuff, we have to stop the bleeding by showing them we have a heart of compassion. And we're going to show that compassion to you, and we're going to meet the need. Right there, right where it is. After he met that need, he tended to his emotional needs. Wouldn't it have been kind of dumb if he'd have bandaged him up and put the oil and the wine on him and had him all good to go and said, okay, see you later. Let me know. Maybe I'll see you in Jerusalem in a week or two. Maybe I'll see you milling around out there. I'll just see you around. I did my part. Oh, I hate that word from a church. My part. No, he didn't. After he met the immediate need and he got him out of critical condition, he carried him to safety. As a matter of fact, he put the man on his own donkey. And so he walked the rest of the way down to down to Jerusalem. He walked the rest of the way as this man who had been beaten and broken, he hadn't a clue who he was now on the back of his own donkey, and he was carrying him to safety. You see, folks, we can't just meet their needs and run. We have to meet their needs and be willing to stick around long enough to maybe get their lives to a safe place. That's ministry. That's what it's all about. And then after he did that, well, he tended to his long-term need. He left him at an inn. He got him safe, and of course this man, he had his life to live. I want you to notice that. Jesus didn't say he stayed there until the man was all perfectly healthy and ready to make the trip back to wherever he had to go. He left him at an inn, and he said, please take care of him. And he said, by the way, if he runs up too big of a tab, don't worry, I'm through here on business every now and then. I'll settle back up with you. Don't worry about it. You just make sure that you not only get him safe, but you get him well again. See, sometimes we do ministry, and it's our job to get them to a point so that we can hand them off to the next person. Maybe the next person is in our own church. Maybe the next person is somewhere else, but we have to be willing to get them to a point where they are healthy and safe. If we can't get them healthy and safe, then there is absolutely no idea of how they're ever going to give their life to Christ, because they're going to be afraid to walk the road because they're going to be doing it alone again. Now I want you to see this last part. All at his own expense. The man didn't go out and pass a hat to try to figure out how he was going to pay for the inn. The man didn't go out and say, well, better go do something else to raise some money. He took it all out of his own pocket. He took the money right out of his own bank account to do ministry to this man. Tell you what, that's important for us to notice. Doing ministry is going to cost money. Let me make sure you heard that again. Doing ministry is going to cost money. If you think you can do ministry without it costing any money, please come see me and the elders, because we would like to know how you do it. Okay? Because it cannot be done. Doing ministry will cost money. You know what else it's going to cost? Doing ministry will cost time. You can't do it. You can't possibly do ministry without taking time to do ministry. This man, and not only did it cost him out of his bank account, his trip was delayed because he had to stop and tend to this guy's needs. I must guess he was probably a little bit slower because now he's on foot with the donkey going behind him. All of this stuff was going on, but this man didn't care because he saw himself as a minister, not as a servant. Who shined? Those that serve and minister. Who shined? The person that didn't just see him as a busybody for God, somebody that has something to do at the church, but somebody that could actually see people's lives that are busted and broken and allow it to impact their life and do something about it. I wondered if this man, I realize this is a hypothetical story, this didn't really happen, that Jesus made this story up as he was going, but I wonder if we had a chapter 2 to this story, if this man that was left in Jerusalem to heal ever made his way back to the temple. And maybe when he was at the temple, he went up to the altar to offer his sacrifice, maybe a sacrifice of thanksgiving because he's not dead. And who's standing at the altar that day? The priest that left him on the side of the road. I wonder how he would have felt about the temple at that point. Maybe as he's offering his sacrifice and he heads over to the treasury room, guess who's watching the treasury room that day? The Levite that left him on the side of the road. So he has an image of what serving God is about. Serving God is about what goes on here in this building. It doesn't include me because I wasn't here. You see the difference? Who shines? People that serve and have a heart for ministry. So here's where we need to think. We want to shine. That is the whole purpose of doing this sermon series. We want Parkview Christian Church to shine to our community. Are you willing to see and are you willing to take action? Now, not us as a body, because if I try to say you and we make it Parkview, then that gives me the ability to say, well, that's somebody else's job I've done. Are you, the individual, willing to see what's going on in people's lives, and are you willing to act on what you see? When you see the busted and brokenness of people's lives, are you willing to do something about it? Or are you content to leave them on the side of life's road? Busted, broken, and messed up, left for dead. See, that's a thought that we don't want to ponder in our mind because it tells a lot about who we are. But I want you to understand that Jesus made it very clear. Unwilling to minister, then question whether or not you're really a Christian. Not my words. I didn't tell the story of the sheep and goats. That was Jesus' story. If you can't have any heart for it, then you should question. Not I'm questioning you. You should question your own life. I have one life to question, mine. Don't pray about it. If you see a need and you feel the need to go pray about it, you know what you already know? God wants you to do something about it. Okay, if you feel enough about it to say, I got to go pray about it, then you feel enough about it to do something about it. Check yourself. When you're wandering down the road and you see the people on the side of the road, then maybe God doesn't want us to be in such a hurry to serve. Maybe He wants us to stop and minister. See, these are all decisions that we have to make individually. Again, I can only make it for one person, myself. Each one of us has to deal with this on our own way. What does it mean to notice the needs of others and meet them? Noticing just isn't enough. We're going to do a time of decision, and I want you to ponder that. Now, maybe you're here today, and you're one of the people on the side of life's road. And somehow through some process, you have managed to get yourself off of life's road, and here you are. I want to let you know, we are here to help. We are not only here to serve, but we are here to minister. And one of the ways that we can minister is we can introduce you to the ultimate minister. His name was Jesus. A guy that loved you so much that while you were on the side of life's road doing whatever it is you're doing, He gave His life for you. Today, if you need to have a personal relationship established with that man, let me encourage you to come on forward. I'll set you with somebody. They'll turn the pages of Scripture. They'll help you to understand what it means to be a follower of Christ. The term we use is Christian. Now, if that's not you and you've already met the guy, then the guy has a message for you. He wants you to go out and do for others what he did for you. Meet them on the side of life's road. When you see the problems, do something about it. Don't just keep going like the Levian priest. So maybe today, this time of decision is the time for you to begin to thinking about, how can I minister? It's not as hard as you think. It doesn't require you to memorize any scripture. You don't have to go to any theological seminary. You don't have to get a degree. All you have to be willing to do is notice the needs of others, and when you see them, meet them. Would you please stand? We're going to pray and then we're going to sing.